Welcome everybody to the Not Another Yoga Class podcast. Today we have an amazing guest. We have Claire Bennett, who is the founder of Hornbeam Workplace Wellbeing. They do amazing things. They do consulting, they do mental health first aid, they do some suicide bits and they do everything. Claire is incredibly knowledgeable, and it's a real honor to have her on the show. Claire Bennett.
Hello.
How are you, mate?
Yes, I'm really well, thank you. Very well.
Good. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about stress and pressure. I experience a lot of stress, and I have my methods for managing it. I also experience a lot of pressure, especially as the founder of a company, and have deadlines to hit and targets to hit and all these other bits and pieces, and it really gets on top of me. So I need to find even probably more effective ways to manage it. So Claire's here today to talk a little bit about stress and pressure and how that kind of bleeds out into the organization and what we can do to kind of overcome it. So Claire, stress and pressure, big problem.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's really important to understand, actually, when we're talking about stress and pressure, that there are two areas that are responsible for these things, okay? There's personally, okay, so for us to take a responsibility for our lifestyles, for the choices that we make, and the things that we do, and the self-care that we either engage in or we don't engage in. There's an element of that. But then there's also an element from a workplace perspective where businesses should really consider the environments that they create, the types of pressure that exist within the workplace, and how that's effectively managed. Because stress gets a really bad kind of rap, I think. Sometimes everyone talks about it in a really negative way, but I think we also have to accept the fact that it's a necessary part of life, and it's really important for us in terms of our personal growth. If you had zero stress, right, no stress in your life whatsoever, you would be heckish bored, right? You would just, there would be nothing. There would literally be nothing going. You'd have no personal growth. You wouldn't experience new things. You would have all of those amazing, like, butterfly in the tummy moments and all of that stuff that's actually really, really good for us. So we have to learn the balance. So we have to understand ourselves well enough to know how to manage that balance. And organizations have to actually know their business well enough, their people well enough, and have flexibility within their working practices to understand that we are all unique and we all have a different, what we call, level of vulnerability when it comes to stress and pressure. You've got all these models out there: pressure curve, stress vulnerability model, all of those things that demonstrate to all of us that what works for one person might not work for other people. And because we all live from the moment we were born up until this point, our life experiences are ours. They're not anybody else's. So what happens for us when we feel stressed, or different times in our lives when we have acute life events, and how that might affect our ability to cope with things that ordinarily we would be all right with, and unfortunately, I think sometimes workplaces, they don't understand that bit, and they don't plan for that bit, and they don't consider where you might need short-term flexibility. Very rarely is this a long-term issue. Short-term flexibility to support somebody through a period of time in their life where they might need that additional support actually would mean that you minimize the impact on the business, you minimize any negative impact on the individual, and the recovery process happens a lot quicker, but we're not always there.
Got it. So there are moments where all of us are going to experience stress and need support. How does it bleed out into the organization when those moments are not addressed?
So I think it depends. If it is, a particular person that may have things, maybe they might not be workplace things. They might be things that happen at home. We're all human beings and we all have personal lives that might affect us from time to time. So I think if you've got one person within a team who is going through a tough time, and that isn't addressed, that isn't noticed, that isn't supported, that isn't checked in on, hey, you're not quite yourself, is there anything I can do to help? Is there anything that you need right now? Instead of, if we don't do that, then actually that overwhelm, that negative mindset that that person is then in, becomes contagious, right? You spend enough time around somebody who is not in a good headspace, it starts to affect you, because we're social
Yeah.
beings, right? We feed off one another. So you've got people then within a team who are unwell because they're all feeling what they call presenteeism, yeah, which is now significantly massive cost to UK employers, because you've got around about 24 billion in the latest research done by Deloitte, 24 billion pounds worth of lost of cost, sorry, to an organisation because of presenteeism. And stress can be a fundamental factor of that. So it will start to seep out into teams. You can end up with entire departments who are showing signs of presenteeism because that one thing hasn't been dealt with or supported within a team. But I also think you also have to think about the pressure if we have poor organizational design. You know, if you've got people in an organization who are all trying to be, you know, jack of all trades and master of none, or if you've got roles that overlap one another, causing conflict, nobody's really sure who's accountable for stuff and who's not accountable for stuff, and you know, people working in silos in their departments who actually, if they work together, it would be a much more seamless working environment. But we don't, that those kind of things don't always happen in organizations. So you can see how the working practices can actually contribute towards that feeling of stress and pressure for the individuals that are working for that organization.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced this. We've all worked, or even in a relationship, right? If you're with your partner and you can start to feel the weight of them if they're stressed or anxious or overwhelmed. It changes your entire ability to do anything, whether it's work or be there as as a partner or whatever. So I definitely experience and see this bleeding out effect from one person, and can see how that would affect an organization in a broader sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, and I think when you think about changing organizations as well, that is also something that contributes to some of the challenges that you might then have, especially where there's been big change. So for example, I've got a client of mine who they've done some buyouts, you know, so they've bought other organizations and now they're kind of merging these organizations together, massive challenge. I've been an employee in an organization that was bought. I'm quite sure what our vision is or what this is and what does that person do, and then there's a little bit of standoffishness and people get a little bit defensive about what's going on. And so this is vital to really consider some of the key contributing factors to mitigating work-related stress, right? So the health and safety executive have some amazing guidelines around this, but not all organizations understand them. So if you've got significant change, two-way communication is really important. So I've got a client that did the same, and actually the buyouts that they had were international. So it was UK based and it was in other countries. So you've also got cultural differences, right? That you're now
Yeah,
trying to pull together. And what I would say is that the client that I've worked with, I've just seen some amazing things happen, because actually throughout the whole process of that merger, the whole process of the organizational design, of considering each role, understanding the boundaries of each role, what does this all look like? What's our working practices going to be? So mixture of hybrid, remote, office-based working, all of those. They had to do remote, right, because they're in different countries, but
yeah,
they were still able to kind of fit all of this together. And the reason they did that is because well-being was at the center of every single planning conversation that they had. Yeah, and they invested in it, and they understood, you know what, if we work with our people, if we communicate well, if we have two-way communication, so we allow people to ask questions, and we allow them to process that change, and we work with them on some of the challenges that they may face, and we're open and we're transparent about what's happening. If you do those things really well, then you bring people with you rather than
Yeah.
fighting against you,
It's
and
them
I think
versus us mentality.
absolutely, absolutely. Instead of, actually, I will say, for that particular organization that I work with, it's a all of us kind of
Yeah.
environment that they've created, even, across countries. They've got people in South Africa, they've got people in the US, and then people in the UK, and what they've created is amazing. And they've put things in place. They've trained their staff. They've done awareness days. They looked at a consistent support package for all of their people in the different countries. That's always a challenge, I think, for organizations. How do
Yeah.
I ensure that across countries I have, the same kind of support that, you might not have available in different countries? They have to find the equivalent. But if you prioritize those things, and you have representations from different people within the organization, and you listen to the feedback, and you haven't got a board, a team in the boardroom that are sat there, so we know our way is the right way. Actually, we're going to consider all of the feedback that's coming our way. And if we don't take on some of that feedback, we will explain why, so that everybody gets it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Communication. So simple, right?
Yeah. I love it. So, I mean, there's going to be a few senior leaders that are going to be listening to this going, we've got some big change coming up. It might be a merger. It might be a change of office, a change of tech, something. It might be redundancies, whatever it may be. What do you do with Hornbeam that helps? How is it that you were kind of part of that cultural experience, I guess, for that organization that you were just talking about?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that we consider the planning stage and the communication stage. And so some of the stuff that I did with that particular client is, we came in to support the bringing together with training. So a large proportion of what we do is training. And so we looked at their longer term strategy. So whilst this merger was happening, they were doing great things with that, all around communication, two-way communication, giving people platforms, giving people the opportunity to ask the questions they need to ask to process the change. So they were doing all the right things around that. But what they found was, with the cultural differences, with the way in which those different organizations worked previously, what you didn't have was a consistent approach around line management skills, for example, or implementing things like mental health first aid, having
Yeah.
a wellbeing strategy, which the UK-based team had a wellbeing strategy, but some of the other countries didn't have that because it wasn't something that they'd ever considered really before. So it was about bringing those things together. So working with the HR team across all of those areas, really considering, okay, so we implemented mental health first aid. Okay, so there's loads of support from a UK perspective because it's Mental Health First Aid England that we're licensed to provide. But we were going to be using that in the US, and we were going to use it in South Africa. So what I did was, through the consultancy, is work with individuals within those countries to understand, okay, so this is the principles of the course that we're going to deliver, which is brilliant. Yeah. So that's a consistent framework across any country. But let's consider some of the cultural differences. Okay. And let's consider what is out there that can support people in terms of their mental health that's available in your country. So I worked with the individuals in those different locations so that we could ensure that this wasn't just, oh, in England you can get this. It wasn't about that. It was about, do you know what? We're going to have really safe conversations with people. We're going to identify when someone isn't themselves, and we're all going to find a way of supporting that person and guiding them to the support that they may well need.
I love it. So communication's at the heart of all of this. Claire, if people want to find out more about you and Hornbeam, where do they go? Obviously, you'll be tagged in the show notes.
Thank you very much. So, of course, Hornbeam Workplace Wellbeing, we've got a website, so hornbeamtraining.co.uk. You can also find me on LinkedIn, as well as Hornbeam Workplace Wellbeing on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram and Facebook as well, of course. But do you know what? I always find a good old conversation is my favorite way to connect. So drop me messages. Yeah, drop me messages. I'd love to jump on calls with people, even if it's just to ask questions, even if you're not ready for the training and stuff yet, but do you know what? You just want to have a conversation, then that's what I'm here for.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. There's tons of value in this. The show notes are going to take me forever. So amazing. Thank you, Claire. And we'll speak soon.
Thank you.
Bye.